Hey guys, had a few requests over the last few days from people wanting a video on the American government shutdown. Possibly less about hearing my opinion on American politics and more about giving you guys a venue to talk about what you think yourselves. I actually resisted making the video because it struck me as being a really boring topic because it's politics. And some people love talking about politics and some people don't, some people don't. But just a couple of things that I've been looking at recently to do with actually Australia, but then it's relevant to this as well. And that is that as a person who lives in Japan, I'll just start by saying Japan government system and the Japan society does have a lot of issues, and we've talked about some of them on the Japan channel. But there is a lot of good things about Japanese society and Japanese life that some people would consider to be better than countries in the West. Now, obviously, there's a reason that people like me live in Japan, and one of the major reasons is the harmony and the society. The society is really harmonious. There's very little conflict, and Japanese people avoid conflict at all costs. And the thing that everybody aims for is harmony, and they'll do that even at their own expense. And it doesn't mean we don't have the same rights here that we do in other countries, but it means that people here are prepared to give up their own rights in order for other people to feel more comfortable. So, we have a right to play our music loud here in the middle of the day, but people don't usually do that because they don't want to disturb their neighbours. And that's in the small picture. In the bigger picture, it goes on to all sorts of things, like that's why Japan has a low crime rate, because it's about the harmony of the group here, and that's built into Japanese people from when they're really small. So teenage kids here don't think about stealing, and we've talked about this on the Crime and Emergency Services playlist on our Japan channel. The thinking of stealing. And it seems really obvious when you live in a society like this one and look back at Australia and look over at the USA and see what's going on there. Most of the problems seem to stem from selfishness. And either that's on a small scale or on a big scale. Now, lots of examples. So for one, I think graffiti's an art, and I love graffiti, so I'm going to put some graffiti on that old man's fence, right? Because I don't think it's graffiti, I think it's street art. So I'm going to put some graffiti on his fence. Japanese kid wouldn't even think of doing that because he's not going to damage the old man's fence. This is generally, there is a small percentage of crime in Japan, but look at its statistics, look at the statistics, Google statistics, and find out that Japan's down the bottom there, Iceland and Greenland as far as crime's concerned, and compare that to Australia and America that are right up the top, And I think it's because it's about, Western society is about my rights, isn't it? My right to carry a gun into Starbucks, my right to say what I think loudly, my right to, and that's the whole focus. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, but it seems to be that the side effect of that is it's flowed over into giving Australia and America really high crime rates, because that's the way the criminals think, is that you've got lots of money, I haven't got any money, so it's my right to take your money. That's how they justify it to themselves. They don't think I'm a bad criminal. They think that guy's got more money than he needs. What an arsehole, I'm going to take some of his money. And he takes his money. America's got the highest incarceration rate of the world, more percentage of population in jail than any other country in the world. Because a lot of those guys in there thought they had the right to take that money or, break into that house or steal that car or do whatever else they thought they had the right to do. And that's on an individual level. And then how this ties into things like what's going on with the government shutdown is that it's all about what I think. And YouTube's full of examples of this individually and in the big picture, but that's what's going on with the American government at the moment. They're not focused on their society and how to make their society the best, and they would say they are, and that's why they're sticking to their guns, and they're not going to compromise because they believe in what they believe in, and that's why the government shut down, is that the Republicans refused to compromise, and you know, well, they're probably all equally responsible for not compromising, and as a result, the society is suffering. You know, and this is what happens if you focus on the well-being of the society, then you end up with a better society. If you focus on your rights and your group's rights, so that can be the individual person who goes and graffitis the fence or steals the car, but it also can be a group, and it can be a race, and that's the other problem you get with the racial conflicts that go on in those countries. And when you've got different groups of people that have their things going on, look at the guns. Look at the guns. That's all about having a gun because it's my right, and having a gun. The American way of thinking is, and we have this in those videos we've talked about guns. The arguments for having a gun is to protect myself, and then what it actually means is protecting them. Those people that say they have a gun for protection in America are talking about protecting themselves from other Americans. And then there's another group of people that say they want to protect themselves from their government because their government might become tyrannical and they might need their guns to fight against the American army, you know. So again, it's that conflict. It's about me and my gun. I have the right to have my gun and kill other Americans or protect myself against other Americans. They come into my house, I'm going to kill them. That's talking, you know, that's not focusing on the well-being of the society. That's just focusing on my well-being and my family, and everybody else can go to hell, right? And that's not everybody. I'm not saying everybody, but this is a really common thing. You guys know this is true, that there's that real focus on me. And it's even more obvious to people that live in a place like Japan. It just stands out. It just stands out. Even the comments on the YouTube videos, the sort of things that people from Western countries say, a Japanese person would never say, usually. You know, it just bang, it just really stands out. It's me, it's all about me, you know. The focus is me and my group, and we're right and everyone else is wrong. And then we can take the picture from the small guy stealing the car, and then we can take it to the bigger group with my family. You know, anyone comes into my house and my family, we're going to kill them. You know, there's bloody National Geographic has hit an all-time low. I saw on YouTube there was a preview for preppers. There's a family of preppers in a castle on a hill with their guns. Now that's a classic example of what I'm talking about here. Watch the way Japanese people react to a disaster. Watch what they happen. The government's terribly slow. They're shit slow. They're terrible. But the people themselves, watch how Japanese people react to a disaster. You know, they all come together and they all band together and they all go about. There's none of that, you know, that we've seen in America and other countries where there's a disaster and everyone starts shooting each other. And the whole preppers mentality. If the world goes to hell, we're going to have our castle on the hill and we're going to shoot anybody that comes and tries to take our stuff. That's the focus. You know, here the focus for disasters is big warehouses full of very not tasty biscuits, that, you know, high protein biscuits and water and all that, you know, stuff that you need in a disaster. And that's the focus, that if there's a disaster here, the community comes together and goes to the community centres and does all this community stuff. There's no people, me, I want mine, and if you come and take mine, I'm going to kill you. There's no need for that. You know, I get comments all the time on the Japan channel, people saying, oh, you know, Japanese people can't have guns. They don't want guns. It's just a totally different way of thinking. You know, if you went and asked 20 people, Japanese people, do you want a gun? They'd say, why? Why would I want a gun? There's no thinking like that here, because there's not that conflict. And this is what really stands out. As a person who lives in a country like this long term, when we look out at Australia and America and the other Western countries, a lot of the other Western countries, and you see that constant conflict. You know, neighbours fighting with each other, yelling at each other over the fences, and conflict. You know, in Australia, probably because I lived in a big city and had a security company, there would rarely be a day go by where I wouldn't hear some sort of conflict. You know, people in the traffic, driving cars in the traffic, and road rage was really common in Australia. Very aggressive drivers in Australia. Neighbours screaming at each other over fences. Customers abusing staff in shops. You know, you guys know yourself. What's the last conflict you heard or saw in your life? You know, how recent was it? And here, I heard an old guy raise his voice here once about 5 years ago. Came into a dojo and he was pissed off about something, and he was an old guy and he ranted a bit. Nobody responded to him. He just came and he ranted, and then off he went. There's no conflict. They just don't have conflict. They just, I mean, there is. It's not true. There is. There's the occasional violence and there is the occasional conflict, but it's really rare. Really, really rare. Joe Public doesn't see it. We just don't see it. We don't hear it. You don't hear customers abusing staff in restaurants. You don't hear that, because it's the thing about the society again. It's the focus on the tranquility of the society, and nobody wants to rock that boat. And if you do, you know, in the odd occasion that maybe I've raised my voice a little bit, or I've done something that was different from what everyone else is doing, you get a really negative reaction from the people close to you. You know, they're like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Think about the other people. You know, they're really serious about that sort of stuff. You know, no parking zones and handicap zones and things like that. You know, people don't, just everything. There's a million examples of this. There's a million examples of this. And those of you who follow the videos on the Japan channel, not just the Crime and Emergency Services playlist, but all the videos. You know, look at the train, immaculately clean train stations, and immaculately clean everywhere. They don't throw shit out the window. You know, Australians are terrible for that. And again, not everybody, but, you know, really common in Australia to see people hurling rubbish out the window of their car, you know, and throwing cigarette butts on the ground. They just wouldn't even think of doing it here. Would not think of doing it because of the society thing. You know, that Western thinking would be, I want my car to be clean and there's rubbish in here, so if I throw the rubbish outside, then my car will be clean. And of course, again, it's at the expense of society, isn't it? You know? And that's just that Western way of thinking. And I think the Western way of thinking about the freedom and so on is good and important, of course, but it's gone too far. I think that's the problem, is that this is, you know, we're supposed to be, if you go back, I think a lot of the human condition stuff, if we want to understand it, take it back 5,000 years, you know, and we would have been living in small groups next to rivers, you know, make the fire, and you know, a group of people would look after our kids, and then another group would go out and catch animals, another group would go out and collect berries and, you know, fruits, and, you know, we'd work together. And if you tried to survive alone in that sort of environment with always fighting other people, you'd soon be in trouble, wouldn't you? You know, the people that did the best in that time were the people that worked together as a group and looked after each other. So if today I happen to catch some fish, and I come back and I share it with you, and then tomorrow if he catches some fish, he shares it with me too. You know? And now look at the big shitstorm over Obamacare in America. You know, Australia, you can get free healthcare. Any citizen of Australia can get free healthcare. You got to wait for it. You got to go sit in a hospital for a long time, but you'll get it. You'll get it. This thing with people having deadly diseases and dying because they couldn't get health treatment doesn't happen in Australia because everybody gets free healthcare. The system's not perfect, you know, there's a lot of sitting around going on, but they've got free healthcare. And there's a lot of countries that do. And I think if you look at what goes on with the Obamacare thing, that's straight out selfishness. The people that need that free healthcare, the people that need it are all saying, yeah, we want that. But the other people who don't need it because they've got lots of money and they can have private health insurance say, no, we're not going to subsidise that. We're not going to look after those people. Socialism! How to get most Americans offside with any topic is to tell them it's socialism because they have this big image of it being about the Nazis and stuff, or, you know. And Australia's the same. People are selfish, you know, give them the choice. And, you know, it's unfortunate. And again, not everybody. You know, not everybody. And I think the same goes with Australia and America. I think that the average Joe Public in the street's a really lovely person. You know, and that's, Americans are the same, Australians are the same. You know, the average person that you meet in Australia is a really nice person. The average person you meet in America is a really nice person. But unfortunately, both those countries are dominated by arseholes. It's probably because arseholes are the loudest. You know, it tends to be the case, doesn't it? That, you know, the arseholes tend to dominate our societies, unfortunately. But this is the result. You know, if 80% of the people are really good and 20% are assholes, the society can suck. You know, like most Australians are law-abiding, good, polite people, but there's a huge percentage, maybe 20% of them are assholes. You know, the crime, and America's the same. Look at the crime statistics and all the rest of it. You know, there's too many assholes, and you see it yourself. You drive around in the traffic in Australia, the road rage. What's that? Never see road rage in Japan. Never see it. But what is that? That's people wanting to tell other people their opinion. You know? Mate, so what if that person's a shit driver? You don't have to pull up at the traffic lights and wind down your window and tell them that. What does that possibly achieve? Now, Japanese people don't normally do that because that would upset the harmony of everybody. And it doesn't matter how shit that driver is, the person who abuses him and tells him that is worse because he's being an obnoxious asshole and he's disturbing the tranquility of everybody around him, so they wouldn't do it. And it doesn't work anyway. You know, in Australia they do it all the time. You're an asshole, you can't fucking drive, learn to drive, you asshole. Does anyone really think that guy's going to say, geez, you know, that rude prick was right. I really do need to improve my driving ability. No, he thinks you rude prick, fuck off. And, you know, and they get out and they hit each other with sticks, or in America they pull out a gun and shoot at each other or something. You know, and again, just that percentage of society, but the problem is, when you've got 80% of society living all nicely and trying to be harmonious with everybody, and you've got 12% or 20% being assholes, it makes it really unpleasant. And to be honest, that's the main reason I live in Japan. You know, Australia's one of the most beautiful places in the world, but there's too many assholes there, is the honest truth. You know, I can't handle that, getting up, going out in the traffic to drive somewhere and hearing people abusing each other. And then you get to the restaurant or you get to wherever you're going and there's somebody there abusing the staff. This isn't good enough, I'm not happy with this, rah, 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 rah. That's just constant conflict. And you go home and hear people abusing each other over the fence there, abusing each other about something, and you know, somebody out in the park abusing each other, and someone's always telling someone what they think loudly because they've got a right to. And it's just gone too far. And how often is that necessary, and how often does that achieve anything? You know, the next time you hear somebody abusing somebody loudly, just stop to think about whether it's worthwhile or not. You know, those societies, those two societies that I keep using, Australia and America as examples, but you guys would know other countries are the same. It's all about that conflict, and it doesn't achieve anything. It's just, it doesn't. That's why I don't debate in the comment section of these videos. It's because it's pointless. Some people like doing it, that's fine. That's their right, that's a healthy thing to do, but it's just pointless. You get into big debates with people on the internet or anywhere else, you know, it might bring out some ideas, and discussion, I think discussion brings out ideas, but that conflict, that conflict, I've seen it going on in some of my videos, it goes on and on for weeks. You get a couple of guys locked in there, and occasionally they'll reach some conclusion, but 90%, 99% of the time, they just fight each other endlessly and achieve nothing until eventually one of them goes, oh fuck this, and walks away. It's just pointless. And again, Japanese people wouldn't do it. If a Japanese person disagrees with you, they go, oh, okay. Now they can still have their opinion, but they recognise that giving you that, if you feel strongly about something, they know that if they tell you an opposite opinion, that it's not going to change your opinion. It's not going to achieve anything. You know, I think discussion or debate, when it achieves something at the end, is worthwhile, but when it's just like this, and getting back to the topic, isn't that what's going on with the American government shutdown? There's this, isn't there? They're not trying to find a solution. They're costing, how many $1 billion are they costing the American taxpayer by shutting the government down for a few days like that? It's just insane. Those people that are supposed to be looking after the American people and representing them, their bullshit is costing the American people billions and billions of dollars. That money could be used to help people that need it. You know, people that don't have food or don't have medical care. That's terrible. One of the greatest countries in the world has people with zero medical care and dying because they can't get medical care. That's primitive. That's unbelievable. And again, it's selfishness. It's because the people with lots of money that can get private health insurance go, no, why should we look after those assholes? They can tell them to get a job, they can get their own health insurance. Okay, well, you're entitled to have that opinion, but you know, this is the thing. I agree that people have the right to do this stuff and to say what they think and to look after themselves. Just, I'm number one, I'll just look after me, it's all about me. Every man for himself. Everyone's got a right to do that, but you get the result of that behaviour, you know. And Japan's the opposite. Japan, sometimes you've got to bite your tongue because what you want or think or whatever else, you just have to bite the tongue for the good of everyone else, and sometimes that's difficult. So there's a price to pay to living in a society like Japan, but to many of us, we prefer it. You know, and it's a choice thing. I prefer to live in a society where the focus is on the harmony of society. Like driving in the car here is a pleasure. There's no conflict, there's no road rage. Going to the shops or restaurants and things is a pleasure. Doesn't matter how busy they are, there's no conflict. There can be queues, there are people waiting, there'll be no complaining, there'll be no loud voices. Everyone's just being harmonious. It's a pleasure. Absolute pleasure. It's difficult. A lot of foreigners can't cut it because it is difficult, because that I want, it's about me thing has to be put in the back burner, because it's a double-edged sword. It goes both ways. You know, it's nice living here because other people aren't selfish, but it means you can't be selfish too. And for Westerners, that's really difficult. It's inbuilt inside us that we want to do what we want to do. Fuck everyone else. It's built into us. So it is hard sometimes living here, and a lot of foreigners can't cut it. Most foreigners go home within 12 months. Because they just can't cut it. They come in, I'm going to live in Japan forever, and within 12 months they go home, because they've been focusing on how nice it'll be for them, but they don't realise what they have to do to be part of it. And, you know, that means focusing on the society instead of focusing on yourself. But you get the consequences. So to me, you know, Australia's big problem at the moment is everybody wants lots of money, but they don't want to work hard. They want to have the easy life and earn lots of money. As a result, in Australia, people are currently earning a lot of money because the unions are really strong. They're all earning, you know, I think minimum wage now is like $25 an hour. It's ridiculous. Or it might be less than that, might be, but around $20 an hour is the minimum wage in Australia at the moment. But the result of that is, because the wages are so expensive, the cost of everything's gone up as well. So it's become really expensive to live in Australia. And they're just, to me, it's greed, straight out greed. Everyone's wanting to have an easy life, work a 36-hour week or less, and earn, you know, mega bucks. And the result of that is huge inflation happening, and everything's getting really expensive. And, you know, and again, it's the selfishness that's driving it, you know. So, and again, look, I love Australia, great place, and America's a great place too, but you know, that we can't be surprised if we think we want to live in a society where it's all about me. You can't be surprised if the society fails, because we're focusing on me. We're not focusing on the society. And that goes for the individuals and for the government, for everybody. You know, as long as it's going to be like this, we're living like this, me, 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 you're going to get the result of that. So anyway, that's my thoughts on the American government shutdown and everything else around it. So what do you guys think? Now we'll get some really interesting thoughts from the people with their own opinions. So, more videos coming soon.